handful of people, 14, maybe 15, who would all be down to zero in a week. At the same time, the CDC was expressing real concern. Then the president talked about the coronavirus going away in April magically when things got warmer. He said it was going to go away magically. It was going to just disappear, while his scientists were again warning Americans. Yesterday, you had the president of the United States saying that it's all under control, while his scientists are all saying the same thing. It's going to get worse. We don't know how bad it's going to get. You even had some irresponsible members of Congress, remarkably enough, Republicans, of course, I've got to say that, sadly, as a former member, saying, oh, go out to your restaurants, go out to your one. I think Devin Nunes even said, go out to pubs. That is the worst actual advice I've heard since a monologue was put on a certain network suggesting that this was all a great hoax to take down the president of the United States. So you have the CDC, doctors, scientists, experts from across the world saying one thing, and then you have the president of the United States completely disconnected from his own staff saying quite another. What's going on inside of the White House? Talk about the battle, actually, for the heart and soul, not of the country, but of this administration.
Life has changed in America, and the president doesn't want to admit it, Joe. That's where we are right now, is that it is one thing for a commander-in-chief, for the executive of the United States, to preach calm, to be reassuring. That's okay. That's part of the job. But it's very different right now for the president, who seems to have, at least publicly, his head in the sand as to what is really happening. On Friday, after declaring the national emergency, which was a step that was needed, he was urged to do by members of both parties, including some of his closest advisors, he reluctantly got there because he was afraid that it would send a bad signal to the markets, acknowledging just the severity of this crisis. But when he did it, the markets responded well on Friday. They did. And he then proceeded to take a victory lap on Twitter about it. We saw him over the weekend appear into the White House briefing room twice, once Saturday, once Sunday. On Saturday, wearing another campaign hat, suggesting that this is all going to be over soon, that Americans, again, stay calm. That's the right thing to say. But to not acknowledge the severity of the crisis is very different. Within the White House, we've had a couple of different factions here. There is a growing sense among top advisors, including Vice President Pence, Dr. Fauci, and others, to be more candid about where things are going, to acknowledge the American people that things are going to get worse before it gets better. Others, including Jared Kushner, Stephen Miller, are focused more on trying to be more prop up the markets, to sort of downplay the severity of this incident, of the spread of this virus, even though we are seeing, of course, cases tick up day after day. The president and the vice president urged Americans not to make runs on grocery stores, saying just buy for the week ahead. Right. And we saw, of course, last night, the CDC, against the backdrop of the Democratic debate, suggest that, Americans should, for the next 8 weeks, should avoid gatherings of 50 or more. And that is going to be a thing that changes American life.
It will change American life, but there's not a scientist, there's not a doctor. I mean, I'm reading conservatives who have apologized for Donald Trump for 3.5 years when there was nothing left to defend, who are actually saying this is serious. Yep. Listen to the scientists. I'm seeing it on blog posts from pro-Trump people. I'm seeing it everywhere. And yet the president of the United States, David Ignatius, is still saying we've got this completely under control. It's going to be okay. Things are going to disappear. And David, here's the impact of it, okay? You can have Dr. Fauci and every other great scientist going out telling people the truth. But I'm still getting emails from friends of mine who support Donald Trump, who are saying, the president says this is overblown. I can still go about my daily life. You see pictures from Disney World last night, just shocking pictures from Disney World with thousands and thousands of people crammed together, packed like sardines on Main Street in Disney World. And you sit there thinking, how many people there had the coronavirus and don't know about it? How many were they spread to? And how many seniors are now going to die in the state of Florida and across the nation because people like that would go last night say, well, the president says it's not much of a big deal. So that's fine. So the president goes out and says it's not a big deal. Then he gets all of his scientists telling us how serious this is going to be. and people just listen to the president. He's still responsible for this chaos going on. Why can't he listen to his own scientists?
You know, Joe, that's part of the mystery of Donald Trump. He lacks the self-confidence, the self-knowledge, the wisdom, perhaps, to listen to those who really are experts. I find it a little chilling just to watch all of those experts, the key people we're depending on, crammed up on a podium behind the president because he wants that show, and they're all not much social distance there. I wish they'd give each other a little more space. I don't want anybody too near Dr. Fauci. This period that we're living in, I don't think any of us have ever lived through anything quite like this, is giving us a lesson in what leadership is in the absence of it. When I read my history, I see Washington in the early years of the Revolutionary War faced terrible adversity. Nothing went right. You know, one failure after another. And yet he kept the confidence of the troops and the country. Same thing with Lincoln. Lincoln's search for the general who could win, the defeats early in the Civil War, the sense of despair, desire to abandon this effort. Same thing with Franklin Roosevelt during World War II. Roosevelt was a steady, calm presence. He trusted his generals. He trusted his scientists. He conveyed that sense that he was the nation's father, if you will, and he was going to help everybody get to where they needed it. I hate to be partisan, but to quote something Joe Biden said last night in the debate, this is bigger than any of us. That's the one thing that doesn't come through when Donald Trump speaks, is that sense of humility, which really is at the core of real leadership always.
Well, it is. And Ed Luce, you look at the disaster that the testing rollout was. And again, I've got to say, Joe Biden easily had his best debate last night talking about testing, how he would handle testing. But the president's been disastrous on testing. We're going to talk about the airports yesterday in a second, but no pre-planning for that either. That was disastrous across the United States. Again, confining thousands of people in tight areas, which obviously will spread the pandemic as well. But there you have, again, the president at the center of all of this, still not seeming to take any of this seriously. Again, having his people make the right moves now, but the president's own words still giving deniers a reason to say what Devin Nunes said yesterday: go out to your pubs, stop being a baby, go out and hang out wherever you go. And what the president doesn't understand, Ed, is that spooks the markets. This isn't about me, right? They think this is about the media, like Trumpists. This isn't about me. When the president speaks that way, I know the president. I know his failings. I know what he's incapable of. It's the markets, Ed, that when they hear the president of the United States speak that way, saying we have it all under control when he has no idea what the next 3 months are going to look like, the markets crash. And it's exactly what they did overnight.
So the president was clearly delighted by the Fed's move yesterday to slash interest rates to zero, have $700 billion of quantitative easing, use that bazooka. But what he said shortly after the Fed did that, which was we have tremendous power and control over this virus, negated what the Fed did, because it indicated that the leadership was not aware of the scale and duration of this problem, something that the Fed, by its actions, had just signaled it did grasp. So again, very strong mixed signals there that are being reflected by the market reaction this morning in Europe and Asia, all down. Dow futures all sharply down. I think, you know, the sort of thing I always relate to, and I'm sure we all do in our own way, is that United Airlines pilot, you know, who says, oh, just a slight delay, 10 minutes, we should be off and taxiing. Yeah. And then half an hour later saying, well, actually, it's a maintenance problem. It's going to be a couple of hours. And then 4 hours later saying, sorry, the flight's cancelled. If you give bad news early, people trust you. And right. Donald Trump keeps talking happy talk. happy clappy talk,
Yeah.
and he keeps getting contradicted by the people working for him.